Imagine for a second that you are reading this thrilling historical chronicle.
Okay, like a big sweeping epic.
Yeah, exactly. You've been immersed for, hundreds of pages in a world of larger-than-life figures.
Right.
Massive, earth-shaking conflicts, miraculous escapes, just stunning reversals of fortune.
The kind of story you just can't put down.
Right. And you are totally invested in this epic story of a people fighting for their survival.
Yeah.
They're carving out an identity in this really hostile landscape.
Sure.
So you turn the pages, and you are expecting a grand finale, like maybe a triumphant victory lap, right?
You want the payoff.
Exactly. You want that satisfying, philosophical wrap-up of all the major character arcs that just leaves you feeling like the whole journey meant something.
Like it was all worth it.
But then you turn to the very back of the book, and instead of a resolution, you find this incredibly bizarre, dark, non-chronological appendix that's just tacked onto the back.
Oh, wow.
It doesn't wrap things up at all. Instead, it just plunges you into a shocking, grim, almost suffocating portrait of total societal collapse.
It's a complete left turn.
Total left turn. It's not an epilogue of victory. It is a microscopic, excruciating look at a nation just tearing itself apart from the inside out.
It really is an intentionally jarring reading experience.
Oh, totally.
Because you're dragged from these sweeping, heroic narratives of deliverance, right into a claustrophobic, locked room where just everything has gone tragically, deeply wrong.
Right.
The author basically refuses to let you leave on a high note.
And that is exactly the sensation of reading the end of the biblical book of Judges.
It really is.
Anyone who follows ancient Near Eastern literature knows that the era of the Judges is already a pretty wild, chaotic ride to begin with.
Oh yeah, it's definitely not a calm period of history.
But the ending, specifically chapter 17 through 21, is just on an entirely different level.
Right.
Because it doesn't end with the blockbuster cinematic death of Samson bringing the temple down on the Philistines.
Which would be the natural stopping point?
You would think so. But no, it stops, takes a breath, and then dives headfirst into an absolute nightmare of moral and spiritual decay.
Yeah.
And we know that you, the listener, love taking these ancient, complex texts and connecting them to broad, timeless philosophical concepts.
That's why we're here.
So, okay, let's unpack this. How does a nation go from a generation of conquering heroes to a complete moral freefall in a single generation? We're digging into a really fascinating source today called The Anatomy of Anarchy, Israel's Descent into Kingless Chaos.
It's such a great title.
It really is. And our mission for this deep dive is to extract the most critical insights from this analysis. We're looking at how this ancient nation went into moral freefall and what that actually says about human nature, societal structures, and leadership.
Right. And to answer that, we really have to recognize what the author of Judges is actually doing here. Because these final chapters, they aren't just random weird anecdotes that ancient compilers found in a drawer somewhere and tacked onto the end because they didn't know where else to put them.
Right, like an afterthought.
Exactly. It's not an afterthought. This is a carefully curated, highly specific diagnostic text.
Oh, interesting.
And the events we're digging into today, focusing specifically on chapters 17 and 18, they actually happen much earlier chronologically.
Wait, really?
Yeah. The historical consensus places these events right near the beginning of the era of the Judges, shortly after the death of Joshua.
Oh, wow. Which makes it so much worse.
It really does.
Because this isn't happening centuries after the fact, when everyone has naturally forgotten their history just through the passage of time.
Right.
This decay is happening when the memory of their divine deliverance ever, the Exodus from Egypt, the parting of the sea, the conquering of the land that should have been incredibly fresh in the cultural consciousness.
Precisely. It makes the descent into chaos so much more shocking. We are looking at an author performing essentially a sociological and theological autopsy on their own civilization.
An autopsy. Wow.
Yeah, and they don't hide the cause of death. They state their thesis right up front, which creates a thematic bookend for this entire dark appendix.
Okay, what's the thesis?
This recurring refrain that echoes like a drum beat throughout these chapters. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes.
In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. It's poetic, but it's actually a devastating dual indictment of the society.
Absolutely.
But, okay, I have to push back on that first half right away. There was no king in Israel. The author seems to be making a political argument for a centralized monarchy.
Right.
But didn't the earlier leaders explicitly reject the idea of a king? I mean, Gideon famously told the people, "I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you."
He did say that, yes.
So why is the author suddenly acting like a human king is the missing ingredient for a stable society? It feels like the text is trying to have it both ways.
Well, that is the exact tension the text wants you to feel. You've hit on the core paradox of the entire era.
Okay.
On a purely historical and political level, this text was likely compiled later from the perspective of the monarchy.
Looking back.
Exactly, looking back at the tribal confederacy and arguing that without a supreme magistrate, a human authority to enforce the law, the society inevitably fractured.
So the political vacuum allowed the tribes to just balkanize?
Yes. But you are absolutely right to bring up Gideon because it reveals the deeper theological vacuum.
Right.
God's original intention, baked into the Sinai covenant, was to be their direct king. They were meant to be a true theocracy.
So rejecting a human king wasn't actually the problem. The problem was that they had functionally rejected their divine king, and they had no human king to step into the gap and keep them in line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They wanted the freedom of having no human monarch, but they entirely abandoned the covenantal submission to God that was required to make that system work.
Oh, man.
When you remove both divine authority and human authority, you don't get a utopia of enlightened freethinkers.
You get the second half of the refrain.
Right. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes.
Oh, which, to modern ears almost sounds like a marketing slogan for a lifestyle brand.
It really does.
Like, do what's right in your own eyes, live your truth, pursue your authentic self.
Yeah.
But in the context of this ancient civilization, that phrase is an absolute death knell.
Yes.
It's not a celebration of liberty at all. It is a condemnation of total moral relativism.
It is the ultimate societal cancer in the eyes of the Deuteronomistic historian. Subjective desire completely replaces objective moral standards.
Wow.
And what's fascinating here is how the author uses a textual callback. That specific phrase, doing what is right in your own eyes, is a deliberate, flashing neon sign pointing back to a warning Moses gave them.
Wait, Moses warned them about this specifically?
Yes, before they ever entered the Promised Land. In Deuteronomy 12, verse 8, Moses explicitly commanded them not to practice their faith by just doing whatever felt right to them subjectively.
Okay, I want to make sure we are grasping the sheer scale of the anarchy being described here, because if we think about how societies fall apart, it's easy to picture a classroom with a substitute teacher.
Right, classic analogy.
Like the kids know the rules, but the authority figure is weak, so they act out. They throw paper airplanes because they know they won't be suspended.
Sure.
But the text is pointing to something much deeper than just ignoring rules, isn't it?
It's a completely different category of collapse. In the substitute teacher scenario, the students still fundamentally acknowledge that the rules exist, right?
Yeah, they know they're breaking them.
They're simply taking advantage of a lapse in enforcement. But what the author of Judges is describing is an epistemic closure, an ontological shift.
Okay, bring that down for me.
They aren't just breaking the rules. They're fundamentally redefining reality based on their own personal desires.
So it's less like ignoring a teacher and more like a society where the very concept of gravity is suddenly treated as just an opinion.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Because if I decide gravity doesn't apply to me because believing in gravity isn't right in my own eyes and I step off a cliff, the result isn't that I'm suddenly free from the law of gravity.
No, definitely not.
The result is catastrophic physical trauma. The author is arguing that treating fundamental moral reality as an opinion doesn't liberate you. It results in massive societal trauma.
That is a perfect analogy. And this refrain acts as the literal causal engine for the horror that follows.
First, the political and theological vacuum, no king.
Second, moral subjectivity taking over right in his own eyes.
And third, the inevitable narrative horrors.
Exactly. The author presents a mathematical formula. No king plus moral relativism equals total societal collapse. And to prove this thesis, the narrative brilliantly shifts from the macro level of national politics right into the micro level. It takes us into the living room of a single family.
And this is where the genius of the text shines. It doesn't start with an invading army or a catastrophic economic crash. Societal collapse starts at home.
Right in the living room.
It starts with a guy named Micah living in the hill country of Ephraim. So let's unpack the psychology of this guy because his family dynamic is an absolute disaster.
It really is.
He is basically treating the Ten Commandments like a checklist of things to violate before breakfast.
The narrative efficiency here is staggering. In just a few sentences, we learn that Micah has stolen 1,100 shekels of silver.
1,100.
And he hasn't just stolen it from a stranger or a neighboring village. He has stolen it from his own mother.
Which is a masterclass in covenant violation.
Truly.
I mean, he is driven by covetousness, breaking the 10th commandment. He physically commits theft, breaking the 8th. And by robbing his own mother, he profoundly dishonors his parent, shattering the 5th commandment.
Right.
And 1,100 shekels. That isn't pocket change, is it?
Not at all.
Yeah.
It is an astronomical sum of money in the ancient Near East.
Like, how much are we talking?
Well, for context, later in the biblical text, we see a laborer's yearly wage being around 10 shekels.
10 shekels a year.
So 1,100 shekels represents immense, almost unimaginable wealth. This isn't a minor domestic squabble over a borrowed tunic. This is a major life-altering crime.
Wow.
But what's truly revealing about the spiritual state of this society is what happens when Micah gets caught.
Right. Because he confesses, but not out of some deep pang of moral conviction.
No, not at all.
He doesn't go to his mother weeping over his sin. He confesses because his mother realizes the money is missing, and she unleashes a terrifying, blood-curdling curse upon the thief.
Yeah, she just starts cursing whoever took it.
And Micah hears this curse, gets entirely spooked by superstitious dread, and basically says, hey, Mom, about that silver, I have it.
His confession is purely self-serving. He is just trying to dodge the magical fallout of the curse.
There's no real remorse.
There's no repentance, no understanding of how he has violated the objective moral order. And the mother's reaction is equally devoid of moral weight.
Yeah, she doesn't do anything you'd expect a parent to do.
She doesn't discipline him. She doesn't demand restitution according to the law. She immediately reverses course to protect him, saying, "Blessed be my son by the Lord."
Just like that.
The sin is just papered over. The moral standard is totally subjective, bending entirely to accommodate their immediate comfort and familial preservation.
And then she does something that is truly mind-boggling. She decides to bless him by taking 200 shekels of the recovered stolen silver and dedicating it to the Lord.
Right.
But she uses the specific covenant name of God, Yahweh. She dedicates it to Yahweh for the explicit purpose of hiring a silversmith to make a carved image, a pestle, and a molten image, a masika.
This is the critical pivot. It introduces the concept of syncretism, which is perhaps the most dangerous spiritual disease in the entire era of the Judges.
Okay, define syncretism for us here.
Syncretism isn't outright atheism. It is the blending of different, often contradictory religious beliefs and practices.
Got it.
Micah's mother is using the correct Orthodox terminology. She invokes Yahweh. In her subjective mind, she likely genuinely believes she is worshiping the God of Israel.
Right, she thinks she's doing a good thing.
But she is doing it by utilizing entirely pagan forms and practices that are explicitly forbidden.
She is directly violating the second commandment. You do not make carved images to represent the divine.
And any ancient reader would immediately hear the haunting historical echo here.
Oh, the golden calf.
Exactly. This act, taking wealth, dedicating it to Yahweh, but forming it into a forbidden idol, is a direct, undeniable parallel to the story of Aaron and the golden calf at Mount Sinai.
Right, because when Aaron made the calf, he didn't say, "Here is a new pagan god from Egypt."
No, he didn't.
He said, "Tomorrow is a feast to Yahweh."
The author of Judges is showing us that this family in Ephraim has completely internalized the greatest historic failure of their ancestors and made it their everyday domestic religion.
And Micah just runs with this. He goes all in on his private apostasy.
Oh, he really leans into it.
It's not just one idol in the corner of the room. He builds a whole counterfeit religious ecosystem. He builds a Bethlehem, a shrine, or a house of gods.
Which violates the core mandate of the Deuteronomic law demanding centralized worship.
Right. They weren't supposed to do that.
You were supposed to bring your sacrifices to the tabernacle at Shiloh. You weren't allowed to open up a private, unregulated franchise of the national religion in your living room just because it was a shorter commute.
But Micah is all about convenience, so he makes an unauthorized ephod, which is a knockoff version of the sacred vestment worn by the high priest to seek divine guidance.
Yeah, he's just playing dress-up at this point.
Then he adds teraphim to his collection. What exactly were the teraphim?
Teraphim were forbidden household idols. They functioned in the broader ancient Near East as a mix of fortune-telling devices used for divination, and in some cultures, possessing them indicated you held the inheritance rights to the family estate. They represent an attempt to manipulate the future and secure your own legacy outside of God's provision.
So he's got the shrine, he's got the vestments, he's got the fortune-telling idols. Now he just needs staff. So he consecrates his own son as a priest, which, again, you can't do.
Right. Numbers chapter 3 restricts the priesthood exclusively to the male descendants of Aaron from the tribe of Levi.
You can't just pick your son.
You cannot ordain your son simply because he is available and you own the building. Micah has constructed a Frankenstein's monster of a religion.
That's exactly what it is.
It is built on stolen wealth, pagan practices, and appropriated holy objects, all masquerading as legitimate Orthodox worship.
And right at this moment, an opportunity literally walks past his door. A young man, a Levite from Bethlehem, is wandering through the hill country looking for a place to stay and a way to make a living.
Just wandering through.
Micah sees him, realizes the pedigree this guy has, oh, a real, authentic Levite, and immediately hires him to replace his son.
And look at the compensation package.
He offers the Levite 10 shekels of silver a year, a suit of clothes, and room and board.
Keep the economics in mind here. Micah stole 1,100 shekels.
Right.
He is hiring this supposed sacred mediator for 10 shekels a year. It is a pathetic servant's wage. It demonstrates the absolute cheapness of this entire spiritual endeavor.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. What is so fascinating is Micah's psychological reaction once he inks the contract.
Oh, yeah.
Micah triumphantly declares, "Now I know that the Lord will be good to me since I have a Levite as priest." I love this detail because it perfectly captures his completely transactional view of the universe.
He isn't seeking a relationship with God at all.
No, he is seeking a cosmic loophole.
Yes, his theology is purely manipulative.
Like he views religion as spiritual technology. He thinks, okay, I've acquired the hardware, the silver idol, the shrine, and now I finally installed the officially licensed software, a real Levite.
Yeah.
I have hacked the system.
He's checking all the boxes.
Exactly. He thinks, I have input the correct sequence of spiritual codes, and now the great vending machine of the universe is obligated by my actions to drop a blessing onto my lap. He truly believes he can domesticate the divine.
And the literary irony here is suffocating when you look at the Hebrew text.
Oh, break that down.
Let's start with Micah's name. Micah is a shortened form of Micaiah, which translates literally to who is like Yahweh.
Oh, wow.
It is a name meant to declare the incomparable, transcendent, uncontainable nature of God. Yet here is a man named Gemma, who is like Yahweh, spending his days literally building a god in his own image out of stolen silver, locking it in a room, and trying to manipulate it.
The irony is just off the charts, and it extends to how he interacts with this young Levite, too.
Indeed. The text notes that Micah invites the Levite to be a father and a priest to him. In Hebrew, Avui Kohen.
Okay.
The term father in this context is one of deep respect, indicating a spiritual guide, a patriarch, or a revered teacher.
Right, someone with authority.
But in the very next breath, the narrative tells us that Micah pays him a servant's wage, and the young man became to him like one of his sons.
So he calls him father to stroke his ego, but functionally treats him like a dependent hired son.
Exactly. The sacred language is entirely inverted. Titles of profound honor are commodified into empty honorifics.
Wow.
The priest, who is supposed to be the moral compass of the community, the teacher of the objective law, has become a mercenary yes man for a corrupt, wealthy employer. The entire concept of authority, both human and divine, has been hollowed out.
Okay, so we've spent a lot of time in Micah's house, and we've seen how this disease of moral relativism infects a single household.
Right.
It corrupts the family dynamic, it corrupts the finances, and it completely corrupts the faith. But localized dysfunction is one thing. How does a cancer like this jump from one living room to an entire societal infrastructure? Who scales this up?
That is the terrifying transition the author makes in chapter 18. We move from the microcosm of domestic rot to the macrocosm of systemic tribal corruption.
From the family to the tribe.
Exactly. The author pans the camera out to show us the tribe of Dan. And structurally, this chapter is designed as a deliberate, dark parody of the book of Joshua.
I really want to dig into that because the book of Joshua is the great heroic epic of Israel faithfully crossing the Jordan and conquering the promised land through radical obedience to God's commands.
Yes.
So how do the Danites parody that?
It starts with their motivation. In Joshua, the tribes move forward in faith, engaging in difficult warfare to claim the specific land God allotted to them.
Right.
The tribe of Dan, however, is on the move because they failed. The book of Judges tells us early on that the Danites lacked the faith and the military resolve to conquer their divinely allotted territory on the coastal plain.
They just couldn't do it.
They were actually pushed back up into the hill country by the Amorites. So their current mission to find new land isn't born out of divine command or faithful obedience. It is born out of faithless pragmatism.
Oh, I see.
They were looking for an easier, softer path because they failed the hard one God gave them.
So they decide to send out 5 spies to scout for some easy, uncontested territory, which, again, echoes Joshua sending spies into Jericho, but the motivation is entirely warped.
Precisely.
These 5 spies are wandering through the hill country of Ephraim, and they happen to pass by Micah's house. They hear the voice of the young Levite, recognize his accent or dialect, realizing he's not a local Ephraimite, and they stop at this counterfeit shrine.
And what do they ask him?
They ask this mercenary priest to do his job. They say, "Inquire of God, please, that we may know whether the journey on which we are setting out will succeed."
And this interaction perfectly illustrates the utter uselessness of a corrupt relativist priesthood.
Because he doesn't actually check with God, does he?
The Levite doesn't consult the true God at all. He doesn't look at these spies and rebuke them for abandoning their allotted territory and operating out of fear.
Which is what a real priest should have done.
Exactly. He just acts as a spiritual rubber stamp. He gives them a fake feel-good oracle saying, "Go in peace. The journey on which you go is under the eye of the Lord."
Whatever they want to hear.
That's exactly what they want to hear. He validates their pragmatic cowardice with a veneer of divine approval.
So, armed with this fake prophecy, the spies travel far to the north and find a city called Laish. And the way the text describes Laish is really unsettling.
It's heartbreaking, really.
It notes that the people there were quiet, secure, peaceful, and unsuspecting. They had no ties with anyone else. They were totally isolated.
Easy targets.
Exactly. They're the perfect defenseless target for a tribe that is looking for a shortcut. So the spies go back, muster an army of 600 heavily armed Danite warriors, and they begin the long march north to take this city.
But on their way to commit this act of unjust, opportunistic conquest, they make a highly significant detour.
They remember the shrine.
They stop back at Micah's house in Ephraim.
And we get to watch the mechanism of anarchy in real time. These 600 heavily armed warriors show up at Micah's house.
It's a mob.
While the army stands intimidating guard at the gate, the 5 spies just walk right into Micah's private shrine and steal his entire DIY religion. They just pack up the carved image, the ephod, the teraphim, and the molten image.
They literally steal his gods.
And when the Levite, the priest Micah hired and treated like a son, asks what they are doing, the Danites offer him a corporate upgrade.
A promotion.
Right. They say, "Keep quiet, put your hand on your mouth, and come with us, and be to us a father and a priest. Is it better for you to be priest to the house of one man, or that you be priest to a tribe and clan in Israel?"
And the Levite doesn't even blink. The text explicitly says his heart was glad.
He's thrilled.
He happily abandons his employer, takes the stolen goods, and jumps in with the heavily armed mob. It is such a brilliant psychological insight.
How so?
A transactional religion breeds transactional loyalty. If your faith is just about getting the best deal and securing the most comfort, then of course your spiritual leader will jump ship the second a bigger congregation with better pay and more cultural power comes along.
Oh, absolutely.
There is no loyalty to truth, only to advantage.
The scene that follows is perhaps one of the most pathetic yet profoundly revealing moments in the entire book.
Poor Micah.
Right. Micah comes home, discovers the theft, gathers a few of his neighbors, and actually tries to chase down this army of 600 warriors.
That's a fool's errand.
The imagery is just absurd. Micah runs up behind this massive professional army, weeping and shouting at them, and he yells, "You take my gods that I made and the priest and go away, and what have I left?"
It's so sad.
Let's just pause and think about the sheer, staggering absurdity of that statement. Imagine worshiping a god that can be kidnapped.
Right.
A deity that you have to physically chase down the road because a gang of thugs stuffed it into a sack and stole it from your living room.
It exposes the absolute hollow emptiness of idolatry. A god that you manufacture, a god that you can control and manipulate, is ultimately a god that can be taken from you by force.
He's got nothing left.
Micah is left with absolutely nothing, because his entire spiritual and psychological foundation was an illusion he built with his own hands. And the Danites' response to his weeping is the terrifying climax of this no king philosophy.
Right, because they don't try to justify the theft legally. They don't try to argue theology with him. They don't say, "Well, the Levite chose to come with us." What do they say?
They look down at him and say, "Do not let your voice be heard among us. lest angry fellows fall upon you and you lose your life with the lies of your household.
We will kill your whole family if you don't shut up and go home.
It is the pure, unfiltered distillation of the might makes right philosophy. This is the terrifying reality of a society where everyone does what is right in their own eyes.
Wow.
When you remove a transcendent, objective moral standard, when you remove the true king, you do not get a pluralistic utopia of free thinkers coexisting in harmony. You get the brutal law of the jungle. The strong take whatever they want, and the weak suffer whatever they must. The Danites want the idols. They have 600 swords. Micah does not. Therefore, the Danites get the idols, and Micah gets a death threat. End of discussion.
And they apply that exact same brutal relativistic logic to the city of Laish.
They do.
They arrive at this peaceful, unsuspecting city in the north. They massacre the inhabitants with the edge of the sword. They burn the city to the ground. They rebuild it, rename it Dan, and then they take Micah's stolen graven image and set it up.
And there it stays.
They establish a permanent, state-sponsored, institutionalized center of idolatry for their entire tribe.
The dark parody of Joshua is now complete. Under Joshua, Israel conquered wicked Canaanite cities to establish tree worship and fulfill a divine promise.
Right.
Here, the Danites massacre peaceful non-combatants just to establish heretical idol worship and secure a comfortable living. It is the exact, tragic inverse of Israel's covenantal calling.
And just when you think this story cannot possibly get any darker, just when you feel like we've hit the absolute bedrock bottom of moral and spiritual decay, the author drops a genealogical bombshell that changes how we view the entire era.
This is where the historian really twists the knife.
Yeah.
Because for 2 chapters, the narrator has kept the identity of this mercenary, opportunistic, idol-worshipping Levite a secret. He's just been referred to as the young man, or the Levite.
Right, she's basically anonymous.
But at the very end, in Judges 18, verse 30, as they establish this false cult in the new city of Dan, the text finally reveals his name.
Okay, who is it?
The priest is Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Moses.
The son of Moses. So what does this all mean? When I first grasped that detail, I was speechless.
It's stunning.
The grandson of the man who led them out of Egypt, the grandson of Moses, the Moses who confronted Pharaoh, the Moses who lifted his staff and parted the Red Sea, the man who went up Mount Sinai and literally received the 10 Commandments, including, "Thou shalt not make a carved image," directly from the hand of God. His own grandson is now running a stolen, idolatrous, pagan cult for a mob of violent, murderous thugs.
It is a breathtaking, devastating detail. This is the profound theological nadir of the text. It's the lowest possible point.
It really is.
And the author includes this specific genealogical note to prove a terrifying point to the reader. Absolutely no human institution, no matter how sacred, is immune to corruption.
Not even the literal bloodline of the greatest prophet and lawgiver in their history.
Exactly. Think about the Levitical priesthood. It was established by God to be the guardians of the covenant. They were supposed to be the immune system of the nation, the moral bulwark against exactly the kind of syncretism and idolatry we've just witnessed.
Right. They were the ones supposed to stop this.
But here, the system hasn't just failed to stop the disease. It has become the primary vehicle of the apostasy. The grandson of the lawgiver is breaking the first and second commandments for a paycheck and some tribal prestige.
It's unbelievable.
It proves that pedigree, glorious history, and structural institutions cannot save a society when the hearts of the people have fundamentally abandoned their divine king.
And what's really striking is how this ancient apostasy lays the groundwork for massive geopolitical disasters centuries later. The author of Judges isn't just telling a sad story about a localized failure in the past, they are explaining the mechanics of a future national collapse.
Yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the Deuteronomistic historian compiling this text is doing highly intentional diagnostic work regarding the northern kingdom of Israel.
Okay, fast forward for us.
Centuries after the events with Micah and the Danites, the united monarchy under David and Solomon will split in a bitter civil war. King Jeroboam will take the 10 northern tribes, and he will face a political crisis.
What's the crisis?
He doesn't want his people traveling south to worship at the temple in Jerusalem because they might shift their loyalty back to the southern king.
So it's about control.
Exactly. So, to consolidate his power, Jeroboam sets up 2 rival golden calves for the northern tribes to worship. And where does he place them? He puts one in Bethel, and he puts the other right here in the far northern city of Dan.
So Jeroboam wasn't just throwing a dart at a map to pick a location for his golden calf.
Not at all. He was reviving an ancient, illegitimate, cultic center that had already been established by the tribe of Dan.
Oh, wow.
The historian is arguing that Jeroboam's great sin, the sin of state-sponsored idolatry that would eventually lead to the total destruction and exile of the northern kingdom by the Assyrian Empire, wasn't a sudden new invention.
It wasn't an anomaly.
It was simply the institutionalization of a rot that had been festering in the cultural soil since the days when there was no king in Israel. The cancer started in Micah's living room, metastasized to the tribe of Dan, and eventually proved fatal to the entire northern kingdom.
That is a terrifying trajectory to map out, and it brings us to the crucial question of application. Because it is very easy for us, sitting here thousands of years later, to look at Micah and the Danites and judge them.
Sure, very easy.
But how do these themes of anarchy, moral relativism, and syncretism translate to our world today? What is the mirror this ancient text holds up to postmodern society?
Well, the text details a process that sociologists and theologians often call the Canaanization of Israel. It results in a profound, terminal spiritual amnesia.
And the scary part of Canaanization is how subtle it is.
Extremely subtle.
The Israelites didn't just wake up on a Tuesday and decide, let's become atheists, or let's formally declare war on Yahweh. It was an insidious process of assimilation. They merged their historical faith with the surrounding culture until it was unrecognizable.
It is a tragic theological U-turn. The entire grand narrative of the Exodus was about moving out of the slavery, paganism, and idolatry of Egypt.
Right.
It was about passing through the harsh wilderness to be forged into a distinct holy nation and entering the promised land to establish a pure, covenantal relationship with God.
That was the goal.
But the Canaanization depicted in Judges shows the Israelites, now physically living in the promised land, willingly reconstructing the very spiritual idolatry they had been rescued from.
They just built it right back up.
By adopting the pagan practices of their Canaanite neighbors and simply slapping a Yahweh label on them, just as Micah's mother did, they are essentially returning to Egypt in their hearts. They've entirely forgotten their foundational story. They have forgotten who they are.
And I see a direct, stinging line between Micah's approach to faith and what we could call modern custom spirituality or cafeteria Christianity. It's the idol of convenience.
How do you see that playing out today?
Well, think about Micah's transactional view of God. He believed that if he just acquired the right physical elements, the silver idol, the shrine room, the officially licensed Levite priest, he could input those spiritual coins into the universe and get a guaranteed blessing.
Right.
Now I know the Lord will be good to me. It's a vending machine theology. And today, we see the exact same impulse.
We really do.
The belief that if we just curate the right spiritual aesthetic, if we say the right highly specific prayer, if we perform the right mindfulness ritual, or perhaps if we donate to the right visible social cause, then the universe, or God, is obligated to give us health, wealth, peace of mind, or a frictionless life. We want the benefits of the divine without the submission to the divine.
That is a very sharp observation. The text draws a critical distinction here. True faith, according to the biblical covenant, is fundamentally transformational, not transactional.
Right.
It requires surrendering one's own will and desires to the objective divine standard. It does not mean bending the divine will to fit our personal desires, our cultural moment, or our convenience.
But there is a point here that I find deeply challenging, especially in our current cultural climate. When you read the text, it is obvious that Micah, his mother, the young Levite, and even the Danite spies, they were all deeply sincere in what they were doing.
Yes, they were.
Micah genuinely believed he was honoring God by hiring that Levite. His mom sincerely dedicated that silver. They weren't twirling their mustaches like cartoon villains. They were earnestly practicing their bizarre hybrid religion.
And that exposes a vital theological and philosophical argument within the text. In our modern postmodern culture, sincerity is frequently treated as the ultimate metric of validity.
It totally is.
If you are sincere in your belief, if it is your truth, and you hold it authentically and passionately, then society dictates it must be respected as good, right, and untouchable.
Exactly.
But Judges 17 and 18 fundamentally deconstructs the idea that sincerity is an acceptable substitute for objective truth. These ancient characters were incredibly sincere, and their sincerity led directly to massive theft, generational apostasy, institutional corruption, and the brutal slaughter of an innocent, peaceful city.
Wow.
Sincerity divorced from objective moral truth is not a virtue. It is a catalyst for catastrophe.
I have to play devil's advocate here because this is the crux of the tension for a modern listener. Today, we are constantly bombarded with the message that throwing off external moral constraints and living your own truth is the ultimate form of freedom.
Right.
We are told that external moral frameworks are oppressive, and true flourishing only happens when you define reality for yourself. How does a text this ancient respond to that deeply entrenched modern ideal?
This raises an important question. What is the actual historical result of absolute moral subjectivity? The Book of Judges is a devastating, bloody polemic against the naive idea that moral relativism leads to freedom or human flourishing.
It just doesn't.
When a society loses a transcendent moral standard, when everyone simply does what is right in their own eyes,
Yeah.
it does not magically create a peaceful, tolerant, pluralistic utopia where everyone mutually respects each other's truths.
No, it creates the balkanization of society. It creates the Danites.
Exactly. It creates a vacuum of legitimate authority that is inevitably filled by raw power. It creates a state of anarchy where the strong and the heavily armed, like the 600 Danite warriors, are completely free to oppress, rob, and murder the weak, like Micah and the people of Laish.
The strong just consume the weak.
The author is arguing that true freedom is never found in the absence of moral boundaries, but in joyful submission to a good, objective, and transcendent moral order.
I love the metaphor of a trellis for this concept. We often think of moral laws as a cage, something designed to restrict us, trap us, and keep us from experiencing the fullness of life.
Right, that's the modern view.
But a better way to view objective truth is like a trellis in a garden. A trellis isn't a cage, it provides necessary structure. It allows the vine to grow upward, to thrive, to catch the sunlight, and to bear fruit.
I like that.
Without the trellis, the vine just sprawls in the mud, gets trampled, and rots. True human flourishing requires the trellis of truth. Without it, you just get the tyranny of subjectivity, where the strongest vine chokes out all the others.
Which brings us to the ultimate purpose of this dark appendix. Why include such a graphic, disturbing, and depressing account in a sacred text at all?
Right. It's not just to bum the reader out or provide ancient true crime.
No, it is highly intentional diagnostic work.
Mhm.
It is meant to evoke revulsion, horror, and despair in the reader.
Mission accomplished there.
By painting this incredibly stark, unflinching picture of human depravity, corruption, and the complete failure of human institutions, the text creates a deep, aching yearning for a solution. It forces the reader to realize that the chaotic, kingless era of the judges is entirely unsustainable.
It has to end.
The repeated diagnosis there was no king is preparing the reader to desperately want the cure.
Hmm.
It is cultivating a profound longing for a righteous ruler who can establish true justice, enforce the objective standard, and restore the broken covenant.
And it's important to note where this analysis ultimately lands within its broader theological context. When we look at Christian theology's interpretation of this ancient Jewish text, it argues that this deep longing for a king, created by the trauma and anarchy of judges, is ultimately fulfilled not by the flawed human kings that follow in the historical books.
Right.
It's not fulfilled by Saul, and it's not even fulfilled by great kings like David or Solomon, who had their own massive moral failures and subjective blind spots.
According to that theological framework, the longing is only fully met in Jesus Christ. The analysis draws deliberate, striking contrasts.
Tell me about those contrasts.
Where the Danites sought to build a kingdom through violence, theft, pragmatism, and the slaughter of the innocent, Christ establishes his kingdom through self-sacrificial love and laying down his own life. Where the grandson of Moses was a corrupt, mercenary priest selling his sacred office to the highest bidder, Christ is viewed as the perfect high priest who offers himself to make true reconciliation. The darkness of Judges is the necessary pitch-black backdrop designed to highlight the absolute necessity of a divine rather than merely human king.
So bringing this all back to you, the listener, we've covered a massive amount of ground today. We started with a domestic dispute over stolen silver in the hill country of Ephraim, and we ended up discussing the collapse of nations, the psychology of syncretism, and the philosophical dangers of absolute moral relativity.
That's a huge journey.
And whether you approach this material as a theologian looking at the arc of salvation history, a historian studying the socio-political structures of the late Bronze Age collapse, or just an insanely curious learner fascinated by the complexities of human behavior, the core lessons here are undeniably potent.
They really are.
The anatomy of anarchy, how a society dismantles itself from the inside out when it abandons a shared transcendent standard, remains surprisingly, terrifyingly consistent across millennia.
The human heart, it seems, has not fundamentally changed since the days of Micah and the Danites.
Nope.
The profound tendency to fashion idols of convenience, to prioritize pragmatism over obedience, and to justify our most destructive actions based on our own subjective desires is still very much with us today.
Which leaves us with a final thought. Something for you to mull over, to really chew on, long after this deep dive is finished. We started the show by imagining reading a historical chronicle and finding a horrifying appendix at the back that stripped away the heroic myths and revealed the hidden, true moral decay of that era.
The ugly truth.
The Book of Judges pulls back the curtain on its own time, exposing the rot beneath the surface. So think about our world today. If historians of the distant future were to write the definitive history of our current era, what would go into our appendix?
That's a great question.
When they strip away our gleaming technological achievements, our economic metrics, and our confident, self-congratulatory cultural narratives, what hidden rot will they expose? What are the blind spots, the modern syncretisms, and the custom idols of convenience that we currently applaud and celebrate because they feel so right in our own eyes, but which future generations will view as the undeniable tragic evidence of our own society's descent into chaos?
It is a sobering, necessary question to consider.
It is indeed. Thanks for taking the plunge with us.